I can't think of another film series that's had such a bizarre trajectory as the Pink Panther films. There are a whopping 11 Pink Panther films in total, 6 of which star the great Peter Sellers as the iconic Inspector Clouseau, with one of those even being made after his death, using deleted scenes from an earlier film. But that wasn't even the most shameless attempt to continue the series without Sellers. The remaining entries in the series are made up of films that either recast Clouseau or tried to center the franchise around a new lead, such as An American Detective or Clouseau's son.
Ha! That felt good!
Not to mention 4 animated TV series, and even more one-off cartoon specials, which I'm not even going to get into. For a film series about a missing pink diamond, they were sure able to milk a lot out of that premise, which is even more impressive considering this series began with Clouseau not even being the main focus, and as Peter Sellers' death would later prove, it would be near impossible to replicate the same level of success without him. But I want to go through all of these movies to examine what's kept the series going for over 6 decades. In a follow-up video, I will be covering the attempts to restart the franchise after Sellers' death.
I would like to buy a burger!
This is the bizarre, incredible story of the Pink Panther movies. The first film in the franchise was originally conceived by writer-director Blake Edwards as the start of a series of sophisticated romantic comedies about a suave jewel thief named Sir Charles Lytton, aka the Phantom, who is played by David Niven. Lytton is plotting to steal the world's largest diamond, a pink gem known as the Pink Panther, now in the hands of the princess of the fictional country Lugash. The diamond was given this name due to a tiny discoloration that resembles a small panther. The role of the detective who would be on Lytton's trail was originally offered to Peter Ustinov, and when he declined, it went to Edwards' second choice, Peter Sellers.
We must find that woman. What was that, what you say?
The movie follows Lytton's attempts to steal the diamond from the princess while on holiday at a ski resort in Rome, where Clouseau has trailed him, showing up with his wife to further complicate Lytton's plans. Lytton's nephew also shows up to further add to the complication. The first time I saw this movie, I was surprised at how little screen time Sellers actually gets, as it's largely an ensemble comedy. While Clouseau is featured prominently, he shares much of his screen time with his wife, who is having an affair with Lytton, while at the same time Lytton's nephew is trying to seduce her. This movie has a lot going on at times, but most of the best comedy sequences involve all 4 main characters, having near run-ins with one another as Mrs. Clouseau tries to fool all 3 of her lovers.
So far, so good. We shall see. Better than ever.
Peter Sellers really shines in his solo scenes though. While the role was always intended to be comedic in tone, Sellers and Edwards discovered they shared a mutual love of the great physical comedians like Laurel and Hardy and Buster Keaton, prompting Edwards and Sellers to re-envision the character and improvise many scenes. This turned what was supposed to be an intriguing side character into one of comedy cinema's greatest clowns, who easily stole the movie.
One moment, please. Hello. Inspector Clouseau?
This movie also introduced the now iconic Pink Panther character in the animated title sequence, designed by Hall D. Pratt and cartoonist Frieze Freleng, as well as the equally iconic theme music composed by Henry Mancini. Prior to the release of The Pink Panther, Sellers had been attached to star in a film adaptation of the play A Shot in the Dark. Dissatisfied with the script, he had Blake Edwards brought on to rewrite and potentially direct. Edwards would only accept the gig if the studio allowed him to substitute the lead character with Inspector Clouseau, and under the stipulation that he and Sellers were allowed to improvise new comedy on set. Seeing the massive success that the first film achieved, the studio agreed, and A Shot in the Dark went into production only months after the Pink Panther's release, and the franchise as we know it was born.
And I suspect no one. I gather the facts, examine the clues, and before you know it, the case is solved.
Thematically, this film is much more what you would expect a Pink Panther film to be, featuring great physical comedy.
There is something that I am very interested to know. This room looks very... What happened? What?
Fun disguises, and Peter Sellers front and center.
Get me out of here. There's the screens.
Staples of the franchise would also be introduced in this entry, such as Clouseau's superior, Police Commissioner Dreyfus, played by Herbert Lom.
It's innocent bystanders. The murderer was after me. Fortunately, he missed.
Fortunately is not the word.
As well as Clouseau's valet, Cato, played by Burt Kwok, beginning a running gag that would run for most of the franchise.
Inspector Clouseau's residence. One moment, please. Commissioner Dreyfus.
Ironically, the only absent staples are the Pink Panther himself and Henry Mancini's Pink Panther theme. But Sellers is just incredible in this movie. It's great to see Clouseau finally get the most screen time, and his physical comedy is on point here. It's not over-the-top slapstick either, just simple comedy executed from the props they had to work with. It's also wonderfully shot, with several impressively framed sequences, like this one, where Clouseau infiltrates a nudist colony, only all the nudity is cleverly hidden by camera placing and props.
Have you been swimming?
Why, yes. How did you know?
It is my business to know.
This movie was a critical and commercial success, and you would expect, with the franchise staples now established, that the sequel would build upon those elements. Well, you would be dead wrong in that assumption.
Oh.
Inspector Clouseau. Shh. I'm Weaver, your opposite number. Oh, that's Shocker. He's Special Brown.
Hello, sir. I'm delighted
Keep your voice
to...
down. You know I'm here in a secret mission.
Sellers and Edwards apparently wished to go their separate ways creatively, while the studio saw the potential in more Clouseau films. So what did they do? They hired a different director and recast Clouseau, giving the part to American actor Alan Arkin. Released in 1968, the aptly titled Inspector Clouseau ignores all the great elements the last movie established. It also lacks Henry Mancini and the Pink Panther himself. And it shows. Arkin is a great comic actor, but he's no Clouseau.
Follow that horse!
Follow yourself!
Get out!
The movie is incompetently bad. I'm actually surprised by how bad it is. It's just not funny, clever, or entertaining. This was a cheap, rushed attempt to keep the franchise going that failed on all fronts. Arkin later said he was humbled by the experience, as it taught him a valuable lesson, that there are some roles he just couldn't play. This should have been the last attempt to continue on without Sellers, but alas, it would not be the case. The only good thing to come out of this movie was the original theatrical poster, which was sadly later replaced by the low-effort, shockingly bad DVD cover that came in its place, which actually more accurately represents the film. Sellers and Edwards would eventually patch things up and collaborate on the acclaimed comedy The Party that same year, showing the foolish studio that there was more to the success of the Pink Panther films than just a character name.
Hors d'oeuvres, sir.
Well, I'm on a diet, but to hell with it.
Cut to 6 years later. It had been over a decade since the last successful Pink Panther movie. Peter Sellers' status as a box office king had faded considerably. To kickstart his career again, he was considering returning to his most popular character, Inspector Clouseau. Blake Edwards' career was going through a similar slump, but he had never given up hope on doing another Pink Panther movie with Sellers. So when another production company was able to iron out an appealing deal, they both leaped at the opportunity. Watching the return of the Pink Panther felt like enjoying a delightful dessert after sitting through the overcooked bland entree that was Inspector Clouseau. It's the perfect equation of elements that made the earlier films work so well. It takes the Pink Panther, both the gem and the character from the Pink Panther, adds the supporting characters and world from A Shot in the Dark, such as Inspector Dreyfus.
Well, Chief Inspector, until we meet again and the case is solved.
Solve it, idiot.
And Kato, and subtracts any hint of the previous entry. The result is a really fun movie that doesn't rely solely on slapstick comedy, interjecting a subplot with Charles Litton, aka the Phantom, who this time is played by Christopher Plummer. Peter Sellers really shines here though. His French accent is notably refined this time around, leading to several misunderstandings throughout the movie.
It is against the law for you to play your musical instrument.
The law?
What?
He also takes on more disguises than all of the previous films combined, with each becoming a showcase for Sellers' chameleon-like talent.
Could ski before I could even crawl.
He's notably just a bit slower, having suffered a heart attack since he last played the character, but this doesn't hold him back too much. This movie really defines why he was so irreplaceable as Clouseau.
Gesundheit.
As the plot just takes the back focus to watching him cause one disaster after another. This movie was a smash hit, being the highest grossing of the series thus far, putting Sellers and Edwards back on top.
Nice burger. I thought you said your dog did not bite.
That is not my dog.
Another sequel was quickly commissioned, and for the first time in the franchise history, it would connect directly to the previous film. 1976's The Pink Panther Strikes Again is the first in the franchise to pick up pretty much exactly where the last one left off. As usual, Sellers is the highlight here.
I expect you're all wondering why I asked you here.
But the plot is pretty out there. I guess the last entry had painted the series into a corner, ending with Clouseau causing Dreyfus to finally go insane. So this one finds Dreyfus escaping the hospital and becoming a supervillain. It feels a lot like a James Bond parody at times, but there is a lot of fun slapstick scenes here, especially those with Clouseau and Kato. It also has the best opening animation of the series, being a parody of different movies. Despite carrying over the Pink Panther theming, this movie has nothing to do with the actual diamond, as the Pink Panther moniker seemed to refer to Clouseau himself from this point forward.
Clear.
Clear?
What?
You said it clear?
Yes.
The first cut of this movie was close to 3 hours long. The studio forced Edwards to cut down the movie considerably. But all that deleted footage would surface again someday. More on that later though. I would say check this one out, but the next sequel completely retcons it, acting as if this entry didn't even happen. Because why start making sense at this point.
I am off to Munich. Most ingenious. The old closet lawyer.
1978's Revenge of the Pink Panther again has nothing to do with the Pink Panther diamond, with the plot revolving around Clouseau going undercover in the criminal underworld to find out who plotted to kill him. It ignores the events of the previous film, with Dreyfus reinstated as chief inspector.
Coris Christum Dominum Nostrum. Amen. Requiem aeternam Domini Domine, ettus perpetual requiescant in pace.
There are more silly disguises, absurd physical comedy scenes, and chances for Sellers to prove he was still at the top of his game. At one point, Clouseau disguises himself as a Marlon Brando-esque gangster in what is probably my most favorite disguise of the movie.
Oh, hey, mamma mia, spaghettino to Al Pacino.
But the highlight of the movie for me comes from Clouseau and Kato becoming sort of a buddy cop duo. The first time in the franchise where Kato has more to do than just attack Clouseau. I like how Edwards and Sellers continued finding new scenarios to throw Clouseau into, as this movie pits him against the French Connection. As with the last two movies, this one was a huge success. Despite suffering even more heart problems, Sellers shows here that there was more energy in the character than ever before. He was heavily involved with writing the script of the next film, to be titled Romance of the Pink Panther. The final draft was completed on July 16, 1980. 8 days later, Peter Sellers suffered yet another heart attack, but this time it was fatal. He was 54 years old. Though Dudley Moore was offered the opportunity to take over the Clouseau role and film Romance of the Pink Panther, he refused, knowing he could never fill Peter's shoes. Peter's death should have marked the end of this franchise, at least for the time being. But remember those hours of deleted scenes I mentioned earlier? Well, they wouldn't go to waste, as Blake Edwards came up with a concept to reuse the footage while continuing the story. But if you thought the series was crazy up till this point, wait till you see what comes next.
Yeah. Well, we will continue at another time.
A pleasure at any time.
I suggest you have your architect investigated as well.